Daniel Carter reached through the rain, grabbed the stranger's arm, and pulled her off the ground before his brain even told him to stop the truck. She fought him, scratched his hands, called him a liar, and he held on anyway. What he didn't know, what nobody in Willow Creek knew, was that the broken woman soaked in mud and blood beside that highway was holding a secret that could bring down one of the most powerful corporations in America. And someone was already on their way to make sure she never spoke again. What city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. You're going to want every part of this one. The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight when Daniel Carter's old truck crested the hill on Route 7's outside of Willow Creek, Tennessee. It was the kind of rain that doesn't ask permission, the kind that soaks through a jacket in 30 seconds and turns a dirt shoulder into a river of brown mud. His windshield wipers were working overtime, slapping left and right in a rhythm that almost sounded desperate. And his headlights pushed maybe 40 feet into the darkness before getting swallowed whole. Daniel had his daughter asleep in the back seat. Sophie, 8 years old, still wearing her soccer cleats because she'd passed out before he could get them off her after the game. Her cheek was pressed against the side window, leaving a little fog circle every time she breathed. He'd promised her pancakes in the morning. Mickey Mouse ones, with the ears. He'd been making those pancakes every Saturday morning for 3 years running. He was thinking about that, about whether he had enough batter mix in the pantry, when his headlights caught something on the right shoulder of the road. At first, he thought it was a bag of garbage. Somebody dumped their trash again, which happened more times than he cared to count on this stretch. He almost didn't slow down. Then the bag moved. Daniel's foot hit the brake before his mind made a conscious decision to do it. The truck fishtailed slightly on the wet asphalt, the rear end kicking out a few inches before the tires caught and held. Sophie didn't stir. He eased the truck to a stop about 20 yards past where he'd seen the movement, threw it in park, and sat there for a moment, with both hands still gripping the wheel. "Don't get involved," said the practical part of his brain. "You've got a child in the car. It's late. It's dark. Whatever that is, it's not your problem." He sat with that thought for exactly 4 seconds. Then he got out of the truck. The rain hit him immediately, cold and mean and personal, the way Tennessee rain gets in October. He turned the collar of his jacket up. Not that it helped much, and walked back along the shoulder toward what he'd seen. She was sitting in the mud beside a guardrail, her back against the metal, her legs stretched out in front of her, like she didn't have the strength to fold them underneath her. She was wearing a gray jacket, torn at the shoulder. Her dark hair was plastered flat against her face. One of her hands was pressed against her ribs, the fingers dark with something that wasn't mud. Daniel stopped about 6 feet away from her. "Hey," he said. She didn't answer. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring somewhere past him toward the tree line on the other side of the road. "Hey," he said again. Louder. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes moved. Found him. And the look on her face when she registered that a man was standing over her in the dark was not relief. It was terror. She tried to push herself backward along the guardrail, her sneakers scrambling in the mud, her good hand clawing at the wet grass behind her. She made a sound, low in her throat, not quite a word. Not quite a scream. "Whoa," Daniel said. He stepped back immediately. "Put both hands up, palms out. Easy. I'm nobody. I'm just a guy who was driving by. I'm not going to touch you." She stopped scrambling. She was breathing in short, sharp pulls. "My name is Daniel," he said. "I live about 4 miles up the road. I got my daughter in the truck." He paused, thought about it, then turned sideways so she could see the truck parked on the shoulder with the passenger lights still on. "She's 8. She's asleep in the back seat. I'm not whatever you're thinking. I'm not that." The woman looked at the truck for a long moment. Then she looked back at him. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. Her mouth moved. The first time, no sound came out. The second time, barely a whisper. "I don't know. Are you hurt?" Pause. "Yes. Bad?" She looked down at the hand pressed against her ribs. like she was remembering something she'd been trying to forget. "I don't know," she said again. Daniel crouched down to her level, keeping his distance. The rain was streaming down the back of his neck now, soaking into his collar. "You got a phone? Anybody I can call for you?" "No phone." Or no person. She looked at him, both. He studied her face for a moment. She was young, younger than he'd first thought. Maybe late 20s. Under the mud and the blood and the general wreckage of whatever had happened to her, there was someone who looked like she'd once been the kind of person who had a plan for everything. "How many cars passed you before I stopped?" he asked. She blinked, like the question surprised her. "I stopped counting." "Okay." He stood up, reached a hand down to her. "Come on, let's get you to the hospital." She didn't take his hand. "I can't go to the hospital." "You said you're hurt." "I know what I said." "Then you need a doctor." "I can't," she said. And the way she said it, flat and certain and exhausted, like she'd already had this argument with herself 100 times, made him stop pushing. He stood there in the rain with his hand still out, looking at her. "Then at least come sit in the truck," he said. "It's warm. I've got a first aid kit. You can sit there and tell me to go to hell, and I'll drive you wherever you want to go. But you can't stay out here." She looked at his hand again, then at his face. Whatever she saw there, it seemed to pass some test he hadn't known he was taking. She reached up and grabbed his hand. She was lighter than he expected. And then heavier, he realized partway through, pulling her upright, that she'd been bracing herself against the guardrail because her left leg wasn't working right. And the moment she lost contact with the metal, she nearly went down again. Daniel caught her with an arm around her waist, without thinking, and she made a sharp sound of pain. "Sorry. Left side." She managed through gritted teeth. "Don't press on the left side," he adjusted, got her weight on his right arm, and started walking her slowly toward the truck. She hobbled beside him, her jaw set hard, her right hand gripping his forearm, like she was squeezing water out of a cloth. When they got to the passenger door, Daniel opened it and helped her up into the cab. She folded herself into the seat with the careful, methodical movement of someone managing pain 1 centimeter at a time. He reached past her to turn the heat on full, and she flinched at his proximity but held still. "I'm turning the heat up," he said. Before he did it, "Okay. And then I'm going to get the first aid kit from behind the seat." "Okay." He did both things slowly and narrated both things before he did them, like he was working with a spooked animal, which, he supposed, wasn't unfair. From the back seat, Sophie's small voice floated up, thick with sleep. "Daddy? Hey, baby girl." Daniel turned around. Sophie was looking at him with one eye open and one eye still fighting it. "Go back to sleep." "Why are we stopped?" "We helped someone." "Go back to sleep." Sophie looked at the woman in the passenger seat with the slow, uncomplicated assessment that only an 8-year-old can pull off. "Are you okay?" she asked. The woman stared at Sophie for a moment, and something moved across her face that Daniel couldn't quite name. "Getting there," the woman said. "Okay," said Sophie, and put her cheek back against the window and was asleep again in under a minute. The woman watched her for a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned away and looked at the rain-streaked windshield, and Daniel could see her jaw working, like she was clenching her teeth very hard to keep something from spilling out. He didn't push. He opened the first aid kit on the console between them and started laying things out. "I'm Daniel Carter," he said. "You don't have to tell me your name if you don't want to." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Emily." He nodded. "Okay. Can I take a look at that hand?" She extended her right hand toward him. The palm scraped raw. He cleaned it with antiseptic, felt her pull back from the sting, watched her force herself back still. He worked methodically, the way he'd learned to his late wife, Karen, had been the nurse in the family. But some things rub off over 10 years of marriage. "The ribs," he said, when he'd taped the hand.
"You said left side. I think they're just bruised. Can you take a breath all the way?"
She did, winced. "Yes. That's good. Cracked or broken? You usually can't get air all the way down." He paused. How'd you end up on the side of Route 7 at midnight in the rain? Silence. You don't have to tell me that either, he said. I was in a car, she said finally. It's not on the road anymore. He looked at her. I got out before it. She stopped, pressed her lips together. I got out. Daniel sat with that for a moment. Somebody else in the car? No, you're sure? I was alone. She said it in a way that seemed to mean something beyond the car. I've been alone for a while. He started the truck. Put it in drive. Where are you taking me? She said it sharply, not quite fear, but close. Hospital, he said. Willow Creek General is 12 minutes from here. I know you said you couldn't. But you've got what might be a cracked rib, a hand that needed cleaning out. And I'd bet money there's more going on with that leg than you're letting on. You can argue with me for 12 minutes if you want. But I'm driving there. She turned to look at him. Why? She asked. Not aggressive. Genuinely wanting to know. He thought about Karen. About the thing she used to say. The thing he'd heard so many times it had become background noise while she was alive, and a hammer blow since she'd been gone. The easiest thing in the world is to look away. The hardest thing is to care. Because, he said, 100 cars passed you tonight and nobody stopped. That's 100 people who made a choice. I made a different one. He glanced at her. That's the only reason. No agenda. Emily looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at the road. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. The emergency room at Willow Creek General was quiet, the way small-town ERs get quiet on a Wednesday night, not empty. But slow, like the building itself was taking a breath. 2 nurses were working the intake desk. A maintenance man was pushing a mop across the linoleum tiles in a wide, rhythmic arc. A man in his 60s was sitting in one of the waiting room chairs with his arm in a makeshift sling, staring at a TV mounted on the wall that was showing highlights nobody was watching. Daniel walked Emily through the automatic doors and up to the intake desk with Sophie Fon's hip. She'd woken up fully during the last 2 minutes of the drive and had watched everything with large, serious eyes and asked 0 questions, which was either maturity or shock. The nurse at the desk looked up. Her name tag said Helen, and she had the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen everything and was still capable of being appropriately alarmed by the right things. Emily's appearance alarmed her. What happened? Helen was already reaching for a form. I found her on the shoulder of Route 7, Daniel said. Accident? Partially, Emily said. Helen looked at Daniel. He gave a small shrug that said, I know about as much as you do. Can I get your name? Helen asked. A pause that lasted about a half-second too long. Emily Brooks, she said. Helen started writing. Date of birth? June 14th, 1995. Address? Another pause. I'm between places right now, Emily said. Helen looked up from the form. Something passed between the 2 women, a kind of silent communication that Daniel was not part of and not meant to be. Okay, Helen said simply, and went back to writing. Let's get you into a room. He should have left. He knew that. In the rational, practical part of his brain, where he kept the things that kept them alive. The mortgage that was $300 more than comfortable. The truck that needed new rear brakes before winter. The fact that Sophie had school tomorrow and he had a full shop day starting at 7 a.m. He should have handed Emily off. Made sure she was breathing and driven home. He stayed. He sat in the waiting room with Sophie sleeping across 2 chairs and her head in his lap, watching the maintenance man work his way back across the linoleum. And he wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at him when he pulled up. That terror, like she'd been expecting something much worse than a man who stopped to help. Maybe it was the 100 cars that hadn't stopped. Maybe it was the way she'd said, I've been alone for a while. In that voice that carried the full weight of what that meant. He sat. He waited. After an hour and 20 minutes, Helen appeared at the waiting room door. She's asking for you. Emily was sitting up in the hospital bed with her left side wrapped tight in bandage, and her right hand cleaned and dressed properly. 3 of the cuts on her face had been butterflied shut. Her color was better, the pallor of exposure and shock had lifted somewhat, replaced by something that was at least adjacent to normal. She looked different under the fluorescent lights, more real, more present. She was holding a small device in her good hand, turning it over and over, and she tucked it under the thin hospital blanket the moment he came through the door. He pretended not to notice. "How you doing?" he asked. "2 bruised ribs. Nothing cracked. Possible mild concussion. Leg is." She paused. "My left knee, hyperextended. It'll hurt for weeks, but it's stable." She said it the way someone recites a list. Methodical, keeping herself at arm's length from her own body. "Good." He sat down in the plastic chair beside the bed. "They going to keep you?" "They wanted to. I told them no." "Emily, I can't stay here," she said it with her eyes on him. No apology in her voice. Completely flat and completely certain. "I know how that sounds, but I can't." He studied her for a moment. There were questions he could have asked. He had a lot of them lined up. If he was honest, in the part of his brain that had been nagging at him since the road. The device she'd hidden under the blanket. The way she'd paused before giving her name. The "I can't go to the hospital" before she'd agreed to it. He asked the one that actually mattered. "Do you have somewhere to go?" She looked at her hands. "I'm working on that." "That's a no. That's a working on it." He leaned back in the chair, looked at the ceiling. The fluorescent tube directly above him had a slight flicker that was going to drive someone crazy eventually. "I've got a spare room," he said to the ceiling. Silence. "It's nothing fancy," he continued. "It's basically a closet with a bed in it. And Sophie keeps her soccer stuff in there, so it smells a little like shin guards. But it's a door that locks and a roof that doesn't leak." He looked back down at her. "1 night, maybe 2, until you figure out you're working on it." She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't parse. Not quite suspicious. Not quite grateful. Something between those two things that didn't have a name. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "Because you need it. You don't know me." "I know you had 100 chances to get out of that truck and you didn't," he said. "I know you could have given the nurse a fake name and you didn't. I know you asked for me instead of a social worker." He shrugged. "That's enough." Emily looked at her lap for a long moment. "I'm going to be honest with you," she said. "I'm in a situation that is." She stopped, started again. "There are people looking for me. And they're not people who stop because of a sign, or because you ask nicely. If I come to your house, I'm bringing something with me that you don't want in your house." Daniel looked at her steadily. "Are you dangerous?" "No, there's dangerous." A pause. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I drove 4 miles in the rain and then sat in a plastic chair for an hour and a half for a stranger I found on the side of the road. My risk assessment is maybe a little different from most people's." Something moved in her face. Not quite a smile. Something that was a cousin of one. Traveling from far away. "Your daughter is in this too," she said. "Whatever choice you make. Sophie's in it." He felt that land. Let it settle. "Yeah," he said. "She is." He paused. "That's why I'm asking you directly. You sitting there looking me in the eye. Telling me there's risk. That's the most honest explanation that's happened to either of us tonight." He leaned forward. Elbows on knees. "So you tell me, can you keep it controlled? Is this something that follows you through my front door the second you walk in? Or is this something that gives us some time?" Emily was quiet for a long moment, thinking, not stalling. "I think we have some time," she said. "A few days. Maybe. They don't know where I am. They think..." She stopped. "They think I failed, that I lost what I was carrying. If I can stay quiet and stay off the grid for a few days, I think I can find someone I trust enough to hand it off to." "Hand what off?" She looked at him. "Not tonight," she said. He nodded. "Not tonight." He stood up, moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame and looked back at her. "There's a discharge nurse who's going to come in with paperwork in about 15 minutes, he said. "I'll be in the waiting room, Daniel." He looked back. "I've met a lot of people in the last 6 months who were deciding whether I was worth the trouble," she said. "Most of them decided no." She looked at her wrapped hand. "I just want you to know I understand what you're risking." "I know you do," he said. "That's why I trust you." He walked back out to the waiting room, where Sophie was still sleeping across 2 chairs. one arm hanging down toward the linoleum, her soccer cleats still on. He sat beside her and put his hand gently on her ankle not to wake her, just to know she was there, and stared at the flickering fluorescent tube on the other end of the room until the discharge nurse went past him toward Emily's room. The drive to his house was quiet. Emily rode in the passenger seat with the small device held in her hand. Visible now, a palm-sized black rectangle with no screen. No markings, nothing to indicate what it was. She'd stopped hiding it. He noticed she was turned slightly sideways, her right shoulder against the door, her eyes moving to the driver's side mirror, every 30 seconds or so. Checking. He didn't comment. Sophie, fully awake now, and apparently having decided that the entire night was simply a thing that was happening, sat in the back seat and watched Emily with the quiet absorption of a child who is collecting information for later. "How did you get hurt?" Sophie asked, completely calm, like she was asking about the weather. Sophie Daniel started. "It's okay," Emily said. She turned to look at Sophie over the back of the seat. "I had an accident." "What kind?" "The kind where things that should have worked out didn't." Sophie considered this. "That happens to Dad sometimes with the trucks," she said. Emily blinked. "Yeah," she said. "Kind of like that. He fixes it though," Sophie said. "He always fixes it." Emily looked at Daniel. He kept his eyes on the road, but he could feel the weight of Sophie's statement settling into the cab of the truck, the way certain sentences do when they're more than the sum of their words. "Does he?" said Emily. Quietly. "Yeah," said Sophie, already losing interest, already pulling her attention back to the window. "He's really good at fixing stuff." The house was small and slightly cluttered in the way that single-parent houses always are, lived in hard. Cleaned when possible, evidence of a child everywhere. Soccer trophy on the bookshelf, missing its base. A drawing on the refrigerator with the word Daddy spelled in chunky crayon letters and decorated with what appeared to be an extremely large orange cat. Despite the fact that they did not own a cat, Daniel showed Emily the spare room. It was, as promised, basically a closet with a bed. There was a duffel bag of shin guards in the corner, and a practice jersey hung over the back of the chair, and a small window that looked out on the high yard, where a rusted basketball hoop stood at a permanent tilt. Emily stood in the doorway and looked at it. "I'll move the shin guards," he said. "Don't," she said. "It's fine." She looked at the bed, the window, the jersey. She looked at it the way someone looks at something they haven't seen in a long time, not the room itself, but the fact of it. The ordinary particular fact of a room in a house where someone lived. "Bathrooms across the hall," he said. "There should be an extra toothbrush under the sink, still in the wrapper. Towels are in the cabinet above the toilet. If you need anything, I'm at the end of the hall." "Okay." We lock the front door, but not the back. "There's a chain on it, though. If you want the chain, I'll do the chain," she said. "Okay." He started to go, stopped. "You need to eat something." "I've got soup. Canned." "But I'm fine, Emily." She looked at him. "Canned soup," he said. "Give me 10 minutes." She looked at him for another moment. Then, quietly, "Okay." He heated the soup on the stove while Sophie sat at the kitchen table and ate cereal because it was now technically past midnight and she had the moral authority to demand whatever she wanted. "Is she staying?" Sophie asked. "For a little while." "Why?" "Because she doesn't have anywhere else to go right now." Sophie ate a spoonful of cereal, chewed thoughtfully. "Is she going to be okay?" "I think so. Are we going to be okay?" Daniel put the soup in a bowl and looked at his daughter, 8 years old, wearing mud-stained soccer socks, and looking at him over a bowl of frosted mini-wheats at 12:30 in the morning with an expression that was entirely too old for her face. He thought about 100 cars passing a broken woman in the rain. He thought about the small black device that Emily held like a live coal. He thought about the word dangerous and the pause that came before it. "Yeah," he said. "We're going to be okay." Sophie held his eyes for a moment. "Okay," she said, and went back to her cereal. He carried the soup down the hall and knocked on the spare room door. When Emily opened it, she was sitting on the edge of the bed with the black device in her lap. and her back straight and her eyes alert in a way that said she hadn't been sleeping and hadn't been close to it. He handed her the soup without comment. She took it, wrapped both hands around the bowl. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. He walked back down the hall and stood in the kitchen for a moment after Sophie had gone back to bed. Listening to the rain on the roof quieter now, losing its edge, settling into a steady drum, he thought about Karen, about the night she'd told him, 3 weeks before she died, that the thing she was most afraid of wasn't what he thought. "It's not the pain," she'd said. "It's the idea that people will stop seeing each other, that everyone will just get so scared, so busy, that they'll drive past each other and not even know what they're missing." He'd told her. He thought people were better than that. She'd smiled at him, the way she had of smiling when she was humoring him in the kindest possible way. "I know you think that," she'd said. "That's why I married you." He turned off the kitchen light, checked the back door chain, walked down the hall past the spare room. There was a thin line of light under the door, and he could hear the faint sound of something. He paused. She was crying, very quietly, the kind of crying that takes practice to do without sound. He stood in the hallway for a moment. He didn't knock. Some things don't need witnesses. He went to his own room, sat on the edge of his own bed, and looked at his hands in the dark for a while. In the morning, he would make pancakes. He would figure out the rest. He didn't know. As he sat in that dark room listening to the rain lose its voice on the roof of his small house in Willow Creek, that the woman down the hall was carrying something that had already cost 3 people their careers, 2 people their freedom, and 1 person their life. He didn't know that the small black device on Emily Brooks's lap contained 6 months of evidence that a man named Richard Hale, the kind of man who had a private jet and a dedicated security team, and a senator who returned his calls on the first ring, had been trying to destroy for the better part of a year. He didn't know that at this exact moment, 400 miles away in Chicago, a man who worked for Richard Hale was sitting in front of a laptop, looking at the last known GPS ping from Emily Brooks's cell phone, which had gone dark 3 hours ago on the shoulder of Route 7 outside a small town called Willow Creek, Tennessee. The man at the laptop picked up his phone. He made a call. "She's gone dark somewhere in Tennessee," he said. "We need to find her." Outside Daniel Carter's small house, the rain finally stopped. The night got very quiet, and in the spare room that smelled like shin guards and soccer jerseys, Emily Brooks held the black device in her hand and did not sleep, and watched the window and waited. The morning came gray and slow, the kind of morning that doesn't bother announcing itself, just seeps in through the curtains until the darkness runs out of places to hide. Daniel was already up. He'd been up since 5:15, which was 30 minutes before his alarm, which was itself 30 minutes earlier than he needed to be. He'd lain in the dark for a while, listening to the house, the way he always did after a bad night, not bad in the catastrophic sense, just bad in the way that leaves your mind running laps at 3 a.m. with no particular destination. He'd heard Sophie turn over in her room around 2. He'd heard, once, a soft sound from the spare room that might have been movement, or might have been nothing. He was at the stove when he heard the spare room door open. Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway looking like someone who had been awake all night and had decided to stop pretending otherwise. Her hair was pulled back. She was wearing the same clothes, which made sense because she didn't have others. The bandage on her right hand was still clean. She was moving carefully. Her weight shifted off the left leg, one hand steadying herself on the doorframe without making it look like she was doing it. She looked at him at the stove. She looked at the 2 coffee mugs already on the counter. "You heard me get up?" she said. "No," he said. "I just guessed." She came to the counter and wrapped both hands around the mug, and he watched her close her eyes for exactly 2 seconds when the warmth hit her palms, like she was allowing herself that one small thing and nothing more. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Some." He didn't push that. "Sophie's still out," he said. "She'll be up in about 40 minutes. And then we've got about 12 minutes of calm before the house becomes a soccer stadium. So if there's anything you want to tell me before then, now's probably the time." Emily looked down at her coffee. She was quiet long enough that he thought she'd decided not to speak at all. He'd already turned back to the eggs he was scrambling when she said, without preamble, "My name is Emily Brooks. I'm 29. I used to be a senior financial analyst at a company called Mercer Hale Capital Management in Chicago. 6 months ago, I found something I wasn't supposed to find. And since then I've lost my job, my apartment, 2 people I thought were my friends, and apparently my car on Route 7. Daniel turned down the heat on the burner, turned around. "What did you find?" he asked. She looked at him for a moment. Then she set down the coffee and reached into the front pocket of her jacket and put the small black device on the counter between them. "Everything," she said. He looked at the device, then at her. "Everything meaning what?" "Exactly. Everything meaning Richard Hale, the CEO of the company. The man whose name is on the door has been systematically falsifying fund performance reports for institutional investors for at least 4 years. We're talking about pension funds, union retirement accounts, school district investments." She said it. The way someone says something they've had to hold inside for so long it's worn grooves. He's been taking money from people who can't afford to lose it and cooking the numbers to hide it. And when one of the junior analysts, a kid named Marcus Webb, 26 years old, first job out of college, when Marcus stumbled onto some of the inconsistencies and started asking questions, Hale had him fired, his professional license flagged, and his reputation destroyed so completely that the kid couldn't get a call back from a gas station. Daniel was very still. "And then you found it," he said. "I was doing routine audit prep," she said. "I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was doing my job, and I found a set of subledgers that weren't in the system they were supposed to be in. It took me 3 days to understand what I was looking at." She paused. "It took me another week to understand that the reason Marcus got destroyed wasn't because he was wrong. It was because he was right. And you went to someone." "I went to the compliance officer." Her voice went flat. "He thanked me for bringing it to his attention and told me he'd look into it. 2 days later, I was called into HR and informed that my position was being eliminated. No severance, no reference, just a box of my things and an escort to the elevator. And the compliance officer was in Hale's pocket," she said. "Yes." Daniel exhaled slowly. He looked at the device on the counter. "So what's on that?" "Before they locked my system access, I had about 40 minutes. I've had contingency plans. Since Marcus happened, I knew that if I ever got too close to the truth, I'd have a very short window." She looked at the device with an expression that was somewhere between pride and exhaustion. "Everything is on there. The subledgers, the original performance reports versus the ones sent to investors. Email chains where Hale's finance director explicitly discusses how to mask the discrepancies. And 4 other employees who got Marcused when they got too close documented in a way that shows a deliberate pattern. That's enough to prosecute. That's enough to put Richard Hale in federal prison." She paused. "Which is why, 6 months later, I'm still running, and he's still operating." Daniel pulled the other stool out from under the counter and sat down. He looked at the device on the counter between them. "Who've you tried to give it to?" "SCC Regional Office. They opened a case, and then someone in their building leaked the case number to Hale's attorney within 3 days, and I got a call from a blocked number telling me to think carefully about what I was doing." She said it without drama, which somehow made it worse. "I tried a journalist, good one. Serious publication. I trusted her. She was pulled off my story 48 hours after I made contact. Someone called her editor. She looked at her hands. I had a lawyer for about a week." He withdrew representation, citing a conflict of interest he somehow hadn't noticed when he took my case. "So Hale has reach. Hale has a senator and 2 federal circuit court judges on speed dial. He plays golf with the deputy director of a regulatory body I won't name because I don't want to end up in the river." She said it evenly. "He's not a man with connections. He's a man who has spent 30 years making himself so embedded in the structure of things that removing him would feel, to the people who'd have to do it, like pulling a load-bearing wall." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Outside, A bird started up somewhere in the yard, a cardinal. High and clear, like it hadn't read the mood of the morning. "Who else knows you're here?" he asked. "Nobody. Nobody knows you were on Route 7? I left Chicago on a bus 3 weeks ago. I've been moving. Using cash. The car I was driving was borrowed from someone whose name I won't use." She paused. "They found me anyway. Someone recognized me from a gas station security camera. I think. I was driving to get off the interstate, and they ran me off the road about 2 miles. Before you found me." Daniel went very still. "They ran you off the road," he said. "Yes. Deliberately, yes." He sat with that for a moment. The weight of it. The difference between a woman had an accident and someone tried to kill a woman on Route 7, 12 minutes from my house. He picked up his coffee, put it down without drinking. "You said yesterday you thought we had a few days," he said. "What changed the math on that? My phone's off and has been for a week. The car's gone, and it wasn't registered to me. They don't know where I ended up after the road. They know I was heading south and they'll start working outward from the site." She looked at him steadily. "A few days is probably right. Maybe a little less." "Okay." He stood up, started back toward the stove, then stopped, turned around. "The person you were trying to get the device to the one you said you needed to find someone you could trust. Who is that?" She was quiet for a moment. "There's a woman named Carol Vinson," she said. "She's a forensic accountant. She used to work at the IRS Criminal Investigations Division. She's independent now. She runs her own consulting firm. And she is the single person I know who both has the expertise to verify what's on that device, is personally insulated enough from Hale's network that she can't be threatened or bought." She paused. "She's in Nashville." "Nashville's 4 hours away." "I know. You can't drive with that knee." "I know." He looked at her for a long moment. "I've got a shop to open in 2 hours," he said. "I've got a daughter to get to school. I've got rear brakes on a Ford F-150 that I promised a guy for Thursday." He said all of it like he was reading from a list. Then he stopped. "But I also drove you 12 minutes to the hospital last night instead of calling 911 and leaving you on the side of the road. So clearly my decision-making this week is not entirely practical." The corner of her mouth moved. "Apparently not." "Let me get Sophie to school," he said. "Then we talk about what the next step looks like. Real talk. Not the middle-of-the-night version, okay?" She nodded. He turned back to the eggs. Behind him, he heard her pick up the coffee again. He heard her exhale. Long and slow, like something she'd been holding for 6 months was maybe, just slightly, beginning to loosen. He didn't say anything about that. Some things don't need comment. 40 minutes later, Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway, in mismatched socks and her hair pointing in 4 different directions. Looked at Emily sitting at the counter, and said, without missing a beat, "Are you still here?" "Sophie," Daniel said. "I'm just asking," Sophie said reasonably. "Yes," Emily said. "Still here." Sophie climbed onto the stool beside her and reached for the cereal box. "Good," she said. Like it was nothing. "Dad always makes too many eggs anyway." Emily looked at Daniel. He raised both eyebrows in a kind of helpless shrug that said, 8 years old, I've got no explanation." But he watched Emily look at Sophie. This child, who had offered her a stool and a matter-of-fact good without making a thing of it. And he watched something cross Emily's face that he recognized because he'd felt it himself in the darkest stretch after Karen died. It was the feeling of being let back in. Just slightly. Just enough. He put a plate in front of Emily and didn't make it into anything. And she ate the eggs without being asked twice, and the 3 of them sat in the small kitchen in the gray morning light, and the cardinal kept going outside like it had something to say. By the time he dropped Sophie at school 2 minutes late, which her teacher acknowledged with the patient expression of a woman who had seen Daniel's logistical situation and had made her peace with it, his mind was already working the problem the way he worked mechanical problems. Not the whole thing at once. One part at a time. What moves? What doesn't? What's seized and what's just stiff? He drove back to the house, pulled into the driveway. Emily was in the front room when he came in. standing at the edge of the window, not in front of it. Not visible from outside, but at the edge, watching the street. He'd noticed it the moment she'd started doing it this morning. Casually, like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was trained behavior. She'd been running long enough that it was automatic now. That fact settled in him somewhere heavy. "Okay," he said, shrugging off his jacket and hanging it by the door. "Tell me exactly what you need to make contact with Carol Vinson in Nashville." She turned from the window. A secure way to reach her. "She's careful she doesn't take unsolicited contact by normal channels. I have a protocol, a specific way she and I established to reach each other if it ever came to this. But I need a computer that's not connected to anything that's been near me in the last 6 months. I've got a desktop in the shop office," he said. "It's probably got 3 years of grime on it and it connects to the shop's internet. Not home, that'll work. I'll also need you to tell me if there's anything about the shop you want me to change before you come in, anything visible from the street. Anything that you think. The car in your driveway," she said. "Is it always there? During the day?" "No, I drive it to the shop. If there's a second vehicle in neighbors. Something that doesn't move that's more concerning than a car that comes and goes. Patterns that break are less visible than patterns that hold." He looked at her. "You've been doing this a while. I've had to learn fast," she said. And the flatness in her voice when she said it, the complete absence of self-pity. Like she'd burned through that months ago and was running on something colder and cleaner, told him more about what the last 6 months had actually cost her than anything else she'd said. He drove them to the shop. Carter's Auto Repair occupied a converted 2-bay garage on the edge of Willow Creek's commercial strip, between a laundromat and a hardware store that had been there since approximately the Eisenhower administration. It was not a fancy place. The sign had a letter missing that Daniel kept meaning to replace. The waiting area had 4 plastic chairs and a coffee machine that worked when it felt like it, and a bowl of hard candy that replenished itself by some mechanism he'd never fully traced. His employee, a 23-year-old named Garrett, who had the mechanical intuition of someone 30 years older and the conversational subtlety of a foghorn, was already there when they pulled up. Garrett looked at Emily getting out of the truck with her careful, compensating walk and the butterfly bandages on her face, and then looked at Daniel and opened his mouth. "Morning, Garrett," Daniel said in a tone that was friendly and final at the same time. Garrett closed his mouth. "Customer," Daniel said, which was not remotely accurate but was sufficient. "She's going to be using the office computer for a while. Nobody goes in the office." "Right," said Garrett. "The F-150 is first." "Right. And we've got a Camry coming in at 10 for an oil service." "Right." Garrett looked at Emily one more time. Emily looked back at him with an expression of polite neutrality. "Nice to meet you," Garrett said. "You too," said Emily. They went inside. The office was a small room at the back of the shop, separated from the bays by a glass window that let Daniel keep an eye on the work while doing paperwork. It had a desk, a filing cabinet, a computer that was, as Daniel had promised, thoroughly grime-coated, and a single window that faced the back lot. Emily sat at the desk and looked at the computer. "You have a VPN?" she asked. "I have no idea what that is." "That's fine." She flexed the fingers of her right hand experimentally, winced slightly, kept going. "What's the Wi-Fi password?" He dug around in the desk drawer until he found a sticky note with the password on it, which he'd written down 2 years ago and never changed because nobody in Willow Creek had ever tried to steal Carter's Automotive's Wi-Fi. She looked at the sticky note, then at him, with an expression that said she was doing her very best not to have an opinion about that. "We don't exactly get a lot of hackers," he said. "Clearly," she said, not unkindly. He left her to it and went out to the bays and started on the F-150. He worked. That was what he did when he couldn't control things. He worked. He focused his hands and let his mind do what it needed to do in the background without letting it run the show. He'd learned that in the year after Karen, when the only thing that had stood between him and a very dark place was the fact that cars kept breaking and people kept bringing them in and he had a daughter who needed pancakes on Saturday morning. He was 40 minutes into the rear brakes when Garrett appeared at his elbow. "Hey," Garrett said, with the careful casualness of someone who has something specific to say. "That woman in the office." Daniel looked up from the caliper. "She's been on that computer for a while," Garrett said, "and she keeps looking out the back window." "I know. You sure she's just a customer?" "Garrett, I'm just saying. I know what you're saying." Daniel set the caliper down, looked at Garrett. Garrett was 23 and had a mother who'd raised him right, and a face that did not know how to be dishonest. "She's a friend. She's in a situation. I'm helping." Garrett processed this. "Is it a dangerous situation?" Daniel paused a half-second too long. "Okay," Garrett said, nodding slowly. The way people nod when the answer is yes and they're deciding how to feel about that. "Okay. You don't have to be involved," Daniel said. "I know." Garrett picked up a wrench. "I'm just gonna check the parking lot." Daniel looked at him. Garrett shrugged. "My uncle had a situation once. Somebody parked outside his shop for 3 days before anything happened. He said later he'd noticed the car but didn't think anything of it. He said it without drama. Then he walked out the front of the shop and stood in the parking lot for a minute, looking up and down the strip, and then came back in. "Clear," he said, and went back to the Camry. Daniel watched him go. He stood there for a moment with a brake pad in his hand. He thought about all the things that had happened in 12 hours that should not have been his problem. And he thought about the fact that, somehow, none of them felt like the wrong thing. He went back to work. At 11:40, Emily appeared at the bay door. The look on her face was different than it had been that morning. Not relieved exactly. More like someone who has just made a move on a chessboard they've been building toward for 6 months and is waiting to whether the other side responds. "I made contact," she said. Daniel straightened up. "Carol Vinson." "Yes," she responded. "She wants to meet, but she wants it in person. She won't take a data transfer remotely. She says it's too easy to intercept or to falsify. She needs to verify the chain of custody in person." Emily paused. "She can meet us in Nashville on Thursday." "That's 3 days." "Yes, and your time estimate on how long before someone starts working outward from Route 7 was also approximately 3 days. She met his eyes. "I know." The shop phone rang. Garrett picked it up in the waiting area, through the glass window. Daniel could see him speaking, then his expression doing something complicated. Garrett came to the bay door. He looked at Emily. He looked at Daniel. He said, very carefully, "There's someone on the phone asking if anyone brought in a damaged vehicle overnight. Says they're looking for a friend who had an accident on Route 7. The shop went very quiet. Emily's face went absolutely still. Daniel took 3 steps to the waiting room, picked up the phone and said, "Carter's Auto. Can I help you?" The voice on the other end was male. Professional. The kind of professional that isn't warmth, but is very good at sounding like it. "Hi there. I'm looking for my sister. She had a car accident last night on Route 7. We think she might have been taken to the hospital in your area. But we're trying to trace where the car ended up. Has anyone brought anything in?" "What kind of car?" Daniel asked. His voice was even. He was looking at Emily through the bay door. She was looking back at him, not breathing. Dark blue Honda Accord, 2019. Tennessee plates. "Haven't seen anything like," Daniel said. "If something comes in, I can take your number. I'd appreciate that." Daniel grabbed a pen, wrote down the number the man gave him, read it back, thanked him, hung up. He walked back to the bay. He handed Emily the number. She looked at it. Her face told him what he needed to know before she said a word. "That's not a personal cell number," she said. "That prefix is a VoIP. It's a disposable line, so not a brother." "Richard Hale has never been to Willow Creek in his life," she said. "But he has people who are very good at making systematic calls in concentric circles from a specific location." She looked up. "They're looking for the car. They didn't find it because it went over a guardrail in the dark and the rain. But they'll find it, and when they do, they'll know approximately where I was, and they'll start calling everyone within 5 miles. They already started, Daniel said quietly. That was the call. She looked at him. Which means, we're not talking about 3 days anymore, she said. No, he said. We're not. Garrett was leaning in the bay doorway with his arms crossed and an expression that was young and serious and had apparently made a decision. I've got a cousin in Murfreesboro, Garrett said. He's got a truck that nobody knows about. I could ask him to lend it to us. Both Daniel and Emily looked at him. Garrett shrugged again. I listened through the glass. I'm sorry. But also I'm not that sorry because somebody needs to be thinking practically here, and you two look like you're doing math and the math is going to come out wrong if you wait too long. Daniel stared at him for a second. Call your cousin, he said. Garrett already had his phone out. Emily watched Daniel. He could see her working through it, the decision. The weight of it. The fact that it was expanding now beyond the two of them. You keep pulling people in, she said. It wasn't accusatory. It was almost wondering. That's how things get done, he said simply. In my world, she said. Every person you pull in is another vulnerability. In your world, he said. How's it been going so far? She looked at him for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, something broke in her expression, not grief. Not fear, but something more complicated. Like a held breath released. Fair point, she said. We leave tonight, Daniel said. I need to make arrangements for Sophie. Sophie stays here. My neighbor Ruth has watched her before. She's done it 100 times. Sophie won't question it. He was already running the list in his head. I need 2 hours to get the shop closed. Get Sophie to Ruth's and get the truck ready. We drive to Nashville tonight. We find somewhere to stay that isn't a hotel chain because those have cameras. And we meet Carol Vinson when she's ready. You make it sound simple, Emily said. I make it sound like the next 4 steps, he said. Simple's a different thing. She looked at him for a long moment. The shop hummed around them, the compressor. The impact wrench Garrett was running in the background as if everything was normal. The distant sound of traffic on the strip. Why are you doing this? She asked. Not the same question she'd asked in the hospital. That one had been about that night. That moment. That choice. This one was bigger. This was asking about all of it. Daniel picked up the brake pad he'd set down 20 minutes ago. My wife used to say that the world doesn't get better because the right people are born into the right situations, She said it gets better because ordinary people choose the wrong moment to mind their own business. He looked at the brake pad in his hand. I was already at the shop at midnight last night. Already had my daughter in the truck. Already heading home. He set the brake pad down again. But I stopped the truck anyway. He looked at Emily. That's all it is, he said. I stopped the truck. She looked at him for a long moment. The afternoon light was thin through the shop window. And it caught the side of her face, the butterfly closures. The way she was standing with her weight deliberately shifted. Someone who had been running for 6 months and had not expected to find anyone willing to run beside her. Her jaw tightened. Not fighting something down this time. Holding something up. Okay, she said. Tonight. From the waiting area. Garrett's voice floated back to them, easy and certain. Cousin says yes. Truck's available. He's bringing it here by 5. Daniel looked at Emily. Emily looked at Daniel. Outside. Somewhere on the strip, a car passed slowly. Neither of them commented on that, but they both noticed. Garrett's cousin showed up at 4:57 in a gray Silverado with a cracked side mirror and a Titans bumper sticker that was peeling at one corner. His name was Joe. He was maybe 25, and he handed Daniel the keys without asking a single question, which Daniel appreciated more than he could properly express. Garrett said you needed it, Joe said. So you need it. I'll have it back by Friday, Daniel said. Take your time, Joe said. Then he looked at Emily, who was standing slightly behind Daniel, and gave her a nod that was respectful and incurious, and walked back down the street the way he'd come without another word. Daniel watched him go. Does everyone in this town just do things for each other like that? Emily asked from behind him. Pretty much, he said. Where I come from. People don't even hold elevator doors. Chicago, he said. Chicago, she confirmed. He drove to Ruth's first. Ruth Calloway was 61 years old, had lived 3 houses down from Daniel for 11 years, had brought over a casserole the week Karen died and continued bringing them at unpredictable intervals ever since, and was the only person outside of Daniel's mother whom Sophie would go to sleep for without a negotiation. She met them at the door with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and looked at Daniel with the focused attention of a woman who has raised 3 children and can spot a situation in approximately 4 seconds. "How long?" she asked. "2 nights," Daniel said, "maybe 3. Ruth looked at Emily. Emily, to her credit, met the look directly. "She in trouble?" Ruth asked Daniel. "Not unkindly. Working through it," Daniel said. Ruth absorbed this. She looked at Sophie, who was standing beside Daniel with her overnight bag and the look of a child performing cheerful unconcern with moderate success. "I'm going to teach you to make biscuits," Ruth told Sophie. Sophie's face went from moderate unconcern to genuine interest in under a second. "From scratch? Is there another kind?" Ruth said, and opened the door wider. Sophie went in. Daniel crouched down, and she turned back and hugged him with the particular ferocity that children deploy when they know something is happening, but have decided to trust you about it anyway. "Pancakes when I'm back," he said into her hair. "Mickey Mouse ones," she said. "Mickey Mouse ones," he confirmed. She let go, went inside. Ruth caught Daniel's eye over Sophie's head and gave him a small nod that said she understood more than he'd explained, and that Sophie would be fine, and that he should go do whatever he needed to do. He stood on the porch for a second after the door closed. Emily didn't say anything. She didn't have to. They were on the road by 6:15. The Silverado ran rougher than Daniel's truck and smelled like someone had been transporting either a dog or lumber or possibly both. But it had a full tank and good tires, and, most importantly, it was not a vehicle that anyone looking for Emily would recognize or have a reason to track. Emily sat in the passenger seat, with the black device in her jacket pocket and her eyes on the side mirror. And Daniel drove. And for the first stretch of highway, they were both quiet in the way people are quiet when they're processing things individually before they're ready to share them. It was Emily who broke first. "Tell me about Karen," she said. He glanced at her. "Why? Because you've mentioned her twice, and both times it was to explain why you made a choice that most people wouldn't make. And I'd like to understand who she was." He was quiet for a moment. The highway unspooled in the headlights. He hadn't talked about Karen with anyone, except Sophie and Ruth, in a long time. And even with them, it was in fragments, pieces, the specific memories that came up naturally. Not the whole of her, that he generally kept where nobody could get to it. "She was a nurse," he said. "Pediatric ward at Vanderbilt. She did 12-hour shifts and came home and made dinner and somehow had energy left to sit with Sophie until Sophie fell asleep." He paused. "She laughed at things I didn't expect to be funny. She could read a room in 3 seconds flat. She had no patience for excuses, but infinite patience for reasons." He looked at the road. "She died 38 months ago. Ovarian cancer. From diagnosis to the end was 14 months. Emily was quiet. Sophie was 5, he said. She remembers enough to miss her. Not enough to remember her completely. I'm not sure which of those is worse." "Both," Emily said. "Both is worse." He looked at her. She was looking at the road. "I lost my dad when I was 7, she said. I know the math." He didn't say he was sorry. The word always felt thin against that kind of weight. He just nodded. They drove. An hour in, Emily's phone. That wasn't a phone, a burner she'd been carrying that she hadn't mentioned until now, which she produced from the inside pocket of her jacket, buzzed once. She looked at the screen, her expression sharpened. "Carol confirmed the meeting," she said. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. She named an address in East Nashville. It's a law office. A friend of hers lets her use it off hours for sensitive meetings." "That's good," Daniel said. "It's very good," Emily said. "Carol doesn't do anything she isn't certain about. If she's confirmed in person, she's already taken precautions." She looked at the screen for another moment. "She also says to tell no one where we're going. Garrett knows we're going to Nashville. Does he know why?" "No." "Okay," she said. "That's okay." She put the burner away. Her hand stayed in her jacket pocket. Over the device. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said. "You've been asking me things since midnight last night," she said. "I don't know why you'd start requesting permission." Fair. He checked the mirror. The highway behind them was open and quiet. "The people who ran you off the road, how far will they take it?" The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. "All the way," she said. He'd expected it. It still landed hard. "They already have," she said, in the same flat voice she used when she was saying something she'd had to make peace with. "There was a woman named Janet Cho. She was a paralegal at the third law firm I tried. She wasn't my lawyer. She was just the person who processed my intake paperwork. She got fired a week after I was turned away. Then she got audited. Then she had a series of personal complications that I'm fairly certain were not coincidences." She paused. "I don't know for sure, but I know how Hale's people operate. The message is never just for the target. It's for everyone around the target." Daniel gripped the wheel. "You're telling me this now," he said. "I told you there were dangerous people. I told you there was risk. I am trying to be exactly as honest with you as I can, while also not terrifying you into turning the truck around." She looked at him. "Are you terrified?" He thought about it seriously. Sat with it. "No," he said. "You should be a little bit," she said. "Probably," he agreed. "But there's not much I can do about it tonight on I-65. She made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was the immediate family of one. They drove for a while longer. The dark pushed past on either side. It was Daniel who heard it first. A change in rhythm. Headlights that had been behind them for the last 40 minutes. Holding the same distance, not gaining, not falling back. The same distance through 3 speed changes, and a lane shift he'd made for no particular reason other than to see it happen. He didn't say anything immediately. He changed lanes again, checked the mirror. The headlights changed lanes. "Emily," he said. Quiet, even. She heard something in his tone. She turned and looked at the passenger mirror without being told. "How long?" she asked. Her voice was the same as his. Flat and immediate. All the air taken out of it. "Since before Murfreesboro," he said. "Maybe longer. Is it possible it's just someone going to Nashville?" "It's possible," he said. "I moved lanes twice. They moved both times." Emily sat forward slightly. Her hand went to the device in her pocket. Not taking it out. Just touching it. "What do you want to do?" he asked. She was thinking. He could see it the fast. Organized processing of someone who had learned to think under pressure. "Take the next exit," she said. "Don't signal. Last second. If it's nothing, we add 40 minutes to the drive. If it's something. We're in open country on a highway at night." She looked at him. "Take the exit." He took the exit. No signal. Hard right. The Silverado's tires protesting slightly on the ramp. He watched the mirror. The headlights kept going. Didn't take the exit. Disappeared over the rise ahead on the highway. They sat at the bottom of the ramp for a moment. Idling. "Nothing," Daniel said. Emily let out a breath. Her hand came out of her jacket pocket. "Keep going a different way," she said. "Back road into Nashville. It'll take longer, I know." He found a county road heading roughly southwest and got on it and drove. The road was 2 lanes and unlighted and winding in the particular way that Middle Tennessee roads wind. Following old fence lines and creek beds, completely indifferent to the idea of a straight line. He drove carefully and watched everything, and Emily rode with her eyes moving between the windshield and mirrors in a pattern that had clearly become as natural to her as breathing. "You've been doing this for 6 months," he said. "Not for the first time, but for the first time as a complete understanding, and not just a fact. 211 days, she said. "You've been counting. It started as trying to remember how long I'd been out of work," she said. Then it became something else. She looked at the dark outside. "At a certain point you start counting because you need to know you're still here." They made Nashville just after 9:30. Daniel found a motel on the east side of the city, independently owned. The kind with an exterior corridor and a night manager who accepted cash and asked no questions. which judged by the presence of a handwritten sign on the counter that said cash preferred and the night manager's complete lack of interest in anything, except the bills Daniel handed him. He got 2 rooms. Emily looked at him when he said 2. Sophie's not here, he said simply. But I've still got a daughter at home. Model the behavior. Emily blinked, then nodded. The rooms were side by side, connected by a door that locked from both sides. He told her to lock hers. She told him she would. He believed her. He lay on top of the motel room bed cover for approximately 90 minutes, not sleeping, running through the next morning the way he ran through complicated repairs before starting them. Visualizing the sequence. What goes first? What depends on what? Where the things that could go wrong were likely to go wrong. At some point he did sleep, because he woke up when his phone alarm went off at 6:30, and the room was lighter than he remembered. He knocked on the connecting door at 6:45. Emily answered quickly enough that he suspected she'd been up for a while. "How'd you sleep?" he asked. "Well enough," she said, which told him nothing. "We've got 2 hours before the meeting," he said. "I want to drive the route first. You've been to Nashville before?" "A few times. Not this part of town." "I have the address from Carol," she said. "Let me look at the route." She had it memorized in 4 minutes. He watched her do it. The way she pulled information in and organized it. The trained analytical mind under the exhaustion and the fear and the 211 days of running. He thought about the person she'd been before this, the financial analyst in a Chicago high-rise with a plan for everything, and the person she was now, and how the distance between those two people was not loss exactly. It was something more complicated, more costly, and in some ways more real. They drove the route at 7:15. The law office was in a converted house on a quiet residential street, the kind of street that looked harmless because it was, which Carol Vinson had presumably chosen deliberately. They drove past it once without stopping. Emily looked at every parked car on the block, told Daniel to go around. "Second car on the left," she said. When they came around again, blue Subaru. It was there on the first pass. Engine's cold. "It's been there a while. That's fine." She looked at the office. The curtain on the right window moved when we passed. "Someone's watching." "That's Carol," she said. "That's her doing what she does. She's checking us." "How do you know it's not?" "Because the curtain moved on the second pass." "Not the first," Emily said. "First pass she was looking at the car. Second pass she recognized me." She sat back slightly. "That's her." He parked 2 blocks over. They walked. Emily's knee was better than it had been. She still had the slight favoring of it. But she was walking at 3/4 of normal speed and managing it without letting it show to anyone who wasn't already watching for it. Daniel walked beside her and didn't touch her and said nothing, and was very aware of everything on the street around them, which he felt simultaneously silly and absolutely correct about. The door opened before they knocked. Carol Vinson was 53 years old with short gray hair and reading glasses hanging around her neck and the look of someone who had spent 20 years inside a federal agency that required you to be the least trusting person in any room. She looked at Emily the way people look at someone they've been genuinely worried about. "You look terrible," Carol said. "Thank you," said Emily. "It's been a week." Carol looked at Daniel. The assessment was brief and comprehensive and apparently satisfactory. "Come in," she said. The office inside was not a working law office in any active sense. It was clearly used for exactly this kind of meeting, sparse, clean, no personal effects. The kind of neutral that is chosen rather than accidental. Carol had a laptop open on the table, and a legal pad, and 2 pens and a cup of coffee that was 3/4 gone. Emily put the device on the table. Carol looked at it. "You maintain chain of custody?" Carol asked. "It has not left my physical possession for 6 months," Emily said. "Not once. Not for a moment. Who else has touched it?" Emily glanced at Daniel. Carol looked at Daniel. "He hasn't touched it," Emily said. "He's only seen it." Carol nodded. She pulled on a pair of nitrile gloves. She'd had them in her pocket. Ready, and picked the device up. Turned it over. Plugged it into her laptop with a cable she'd already connected. Waited. The room was very quiet. Daniel sat in the chair against the wall, his forearms on his knees, and watched Emily watch Carol, and thought about the thing that had been building in him since the night before. The weight of it, the shape of what they were actually doing, which he'd understood intellectually, but which was landing differently now. In this spare room, with this woman putting on evidence gloves and Emily sitting across from her with everything she'd spent 6 months protecting, sitting in someone else's hands for the first time. "It's opening," Carol said. Emily exhaled. Carol read. She read silently, scrolling for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And Daniel counted because the silence required something to do with his attention. Her expression did not change in any dramatic way, but twice she stopped scrolling and went back. Once she made a sound that was barely audible, just a small sharp intake of breath that she controlled immediately. She looked up from the laptop. "Emily," she said. "I know," Emily said. "This is..." Carol stopped, started again. "This is not what I expected. I believed you. But I thought you'd found one layer of it." She looked at the screen. "This is the whole architecture. This is how he built it. This is 4 years of systematic." She stopped again, sat back, took off the gloves, folded her hands on the table. "Richard Hale is going to prison for a long time." Emily looked at her. "Can you move on it?" "I have contacts at the FBI Financial Crimes Unit who are not on anyone's payroll," Carol said. "They've been waiting for something like this. Something that was airtight. Something where the chain of custody held." She looked at the device. "This held." She looked at Emily. "You held it." Emily's jaw tightened. Daniel looked away, giving her the privacy of the moment. "How long?" Emily asked. "From when I give it to you to when he can't reach back at us. To when he's in custody." Carol considered. "If I call this morning, if they move on it today, a week, maybe 10 days. These things move fast when the evidence is solid and the agent wants to make the case. And until then," Emily said, "he still has resources, and he still has people who are looking for me." "Yes," Carol said. "Until then." A silence. Daniel spoke for the first time since they'd sat down. "So the question," he said, "is where Emily goes for the next 10 days. Both women looked at him. "She can't go to a hotel," he said. "Can't use her name anywhere. Can't be in a city where Hale's network is dense." He looked at Carol. "What's your read on Willow Creek?" "Small town on Route 7? Carol said. "Below the radar for someone like Hale. He operates in metro areas, through institutional channels. A town of that size," she considered. "He'd have to dedicate resources to a targeted search. He can do it, but it slows him down." "She came in on a vehicle that's not on any record connected to her," Daniel said. "She's been in my house. Nobody in town knows who she is. She's a friend visiting from out of state." Emily was looking at him. "Daniel, I stopped a truck on Route 7, he said. "That was step 1. This is the step after step 1. He looked at her. "You go back with me. You stay quiet for 10 days. Carol does what she does. And then it's over." Emily stared at him. "You have a daughter," she said. "I have a daughter who already asked you if you were okay and told you I was good at fixing things," he said. "She's 8. She will adapt faster than either of us. If they find me at your house, if they find you in a motel room in Nashville alone," he said, "what happens?" The question sat in the room. Carol was watching them both with the careful neutrality of someone who is witnessing something. She has the professional sense not to interrupt. Emily looked at the table for a long moment. Then she looked up at Daniel with an expression that was not relief, and was not weakness, and was not gratitude exactly, but was the honest face of someone who has been alone for 211 days and has just been offered something they didn't know they were allowed to want. "Okay," she said. "Okay." Carol looked at Daniel. "You do understand," Carol said. "Not unkindly, what you're agreeing to." "Yes," Daniel said. "She's under your roof. If they locate her, then they find a mechanic from Willow Creek who picked up a friend of a friend from the side of the road," Daniel said. "I don't know anything about any of this. Neither does she. She's just someone who had a car accident and needed somewhere to stay while she recovered." He met Carol's eyes. "People do that. People help each other. It's not complicated." Carol held his eyes for a moment. No, she said. And something shifted in her face. That wasn't quite a smile, but was the considered acknowledgement of something she didn't often see. It's not. She copied the contents of the device to an encrypted drive she'd already had prepared. Using a process that Emily watched, with the attention of someone verifying every step. And when it was done, Carol handed the original back to Emily. Emily put it back in her jacket pocket. I'll make the call today, Carol said. I'll update you on this number only. She tapped the burner. Do not respond from any other line. Do not contact anyone else about this until I tell you the case has been filed. She looked at Emily steadily. Emily, you're almost done. Emily looked at the table. 6 months ago, she said. I thought I'd be almost done in 3 weeks. She paused. And then 2 weeks. And then another week. She picked up the burner phone and held it in her hands. I stopped letting myself think almost done, because every time I did, something happened. I understand that, Carol said. But this time, Emily said. And stopped. But this time, Carol confirmed. They left the law office at 9:47 in the morning. Daniel walked beside Emily to the car. The street was quiet and ordinary in the full morning light, and nothing terrible was happening in any visible direction, which felt less reassuring than it should have, because both of them had learned that the visible direction was not where things came from. He unlocked the truck. They got in. He started the engine. He'd been about to put it in reverse when Emily said, "Wait." He looked at her. She was looking at the street ahead of them, specifically at a car that had pulled to a stop in the middle of the block. About 40 yards ahead. Black sedan. Engine running, no one getting out. You see it, he said. Yes. Coincidence, maybe. What do? We don't move first, she said. We sit here and we look completely normal and we wait to see what they do. He put his hands on the wheel, looked at the black car. The black car sat there with its engine running. Emily, he said. I know. If that's one of Hale's people, I know. Daniel. Then they found Carol's office, which means they found Carol. Which means Carol is already in danger, Emily said. And her voice had gone very quiet and very controlled. Yes, I know. The black car sat there. Daniel said. I'm going to call Carol right now and tell her to leave the building. Yes, Emily said. Do that. He called the number Carol had given Emily. It rang 3 times. 4. Carol picked up on the 5th. There's a black sedan parked on your street, Daniel said. Engine running. 40 yards west of the building. You need to leave through the back. A pause of approximately 2 seconds. I was wondering when you'd call, Carol said. I saw it 4 minutes ago. I'm already out. The black car pulled away from the curb. It came toward them. Slow and deliberate. Daniel felt Emily go completely still beside him. The sedan passed them. Dark windows. Tennessee plates. Neither of them could see inside. It kept going, turned left at the corner. Disappeared. Neither of them spoke for a full 10 seconds. She's out, Daniel said. Carol's out. They didn't come for her, Emily said. They were watching, checking. She was processing rapidly. They know this area. They traced Carol as a contact, somehow not recently. Probably. They've had her flagged for a while, and when they lost me on Route 7, they started checking all the names in my network. She looked at Daniel. They didn't see me come in. How do you know? Because we'd both be in the back of that car right now, she said flatly. He exhaled. We leave Nashville, he said. Now. Yes. And we don't use the highway. No. He pulled out of the parking space and went the opposite direction from where the sedan had turned. And neither of them spoke for the first 5 minutes. And when they finally got onto the county road, heading back east toward Willow Creek, Emily put her head back against the headrest and closed her eyes for just a moment. They're getting closer, she said. Carol's faster, he said. She opened her eyes, looked at him. You don't know that. No, he said. But I stopped that truck anyway. She was quiet for a moment. Then, that's not an argument. That's a disposition. Yeah, he said. It is. She looked at the road ahead of them. The county road wound through fields and old fence lines and Middle Tennessee morning light. And nothing was chasing them yet, and the device was in Emily's pocket, and Carol Vinson was already out of the building, and on the phone to the FBI. And the road was clear in every direction. For now was enough to drive on. They made it back to Willow Creek by early afternoon. Daniel pulled Joe's Silverado into the shop lot instead of the house, which had been Emily's suggestion on the drive back, and which he'd agreed to without needing the reasoning spelled out. A different vehicle in the driveway. A different pattern. Small things that might mean nothing and might mean everything. Garrett was at the workbench when they came in, and he looked at both of them with the focused attention of someone who had been doing a lot of thinking while they were gone. "You look like the drive went fine," he said, in a tone that indicated clearly he believed the opposite. "It was productive," Daniel said. "There were a couple guys in a car parked on the strip this morning," Garrett said. "Black car. Sat there for about 40 minutes. Didn't come in. Didn't get food at the diner. Just sat." He looked at Daniel steadily. "I wrote down the plates." Daniel stopped moving. Emily stopped too. Garrett held out a piece of paper from his shirt pocket. Daniel took it, looked at it, handed it to Emily. Emily looked at the plate number. The color left her face in a way that was not dramatic, but was complete, like a light being turned down slowly. "You recognize it?" Daniel asked. "No," she said, "but this is an Illinois plate." She looked up. "Hale's company is headquartered in Illinois." "Could be unrelated," Daniel said. "It could be," she said, and did not say what they both already knew, which was that it almost certainly was not. Garrett crossed his arms. "Do you want me to call my uncle? He knows people on the county sheriff's department." "Not yet," Daniel said. "We don't know what we're dealing with." "You do know," Garrett said, quietly and directly, in the way that young men sometimes achieve a kind of clarity that older men have learned to manage. "You just don't want to pull anyone else in." Daniel looked at him. "I'm already in," Garrett said. "I got the truck from my cousin. I kept my mouth shut when that phone call came in. I wrote down that plate." He looked at Emily. "Whatever this is, I'm already in it. So stop protecting me from information and tell me what I'm actually dealing with." A silence settled over the shop. The compressor hummed in the background. Outside, a truck went by on the strip and nobody watched it. Daniel looked at Emily. Emily looked at Garrett. This 23-year-old with grease on his forearms and a directness that had not yet been trained out of him. "A powerful man is trying to keep me quiet," she said. "I have evidence that proves he's stolen from thousands of people. The FBI is moving on it. But it takes time. Until they act, he has resources to find me an incentive, to make sure I can't testify." She said it in plain sentences. "No inflation. No deflation. That's what you're dealing with." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said, "so what do we need to do?" Daniel put his hand briefly on Garrett's shoulder. "Keep your eyes open. Tell me if anything changes on the strip. Don't make any calls about this on your personal phone." "And the uncle?" "Hold on the uncle," Daniel said. "Not yet." They went to the house. Daniel called Ruth from the kitchen. Sophie was fine. Sophie had made biscuits with Ruth and apparently had strong opinions about the correct amount of butter, which Ruth relayed with a tone that was somewhere between fond and exasperated. He told Ruth he'd pick Sophie up tomorrow morning, which was later than he'd planned, and Ruth said simply, "Take your time." And he heard in it the same thing he'd heard before, which was that Ruth was a woman who understood that certain things took the time they took. He hung up and found Emily standing at the edge of the front window, the same position she'd been in that first morning, body slightly angled, visible to herself, but not to the street. "The plate being here means they're narrowing the radius," she said, without turning around. "They're not certain. If they were certain, it wouldn't be a car parked on the strip for 40 minutes. It would be something more direct. They're still searching." "How much time does that buy?" "A day," she said. "Maybe less. Carol said 10 days minimum before the FBI acts." "I know what Carol said." He sat down at the kitchen table. She turned from the window and sat across from him. And for the first time, since he'd found her on the road, she looked genuinely tired in a way that was beyond the physical. The kind of tired that lives in the decision-making part of a person, where you've been making high-stakes choices for so long that the muscle is starting to give. Talk to me, he said. I'm thinking. Think out loud. She looked at the table. They're working the search in circles. Route 7 is the center. They've covered a certain radius already, or they wouldn't be as close as they are. But they don't have a name connected to me, and they don't have a car connected to me. Because the car is at the bottom of a ravine, and I came here with you. In your truck, which has nothing to do with anything they're looking at. She paused. What they have is a geographic probability. I'm somewhere in this general area, and they're being systematic about it. So what breaks the systematic? Daniel asked. She looked up at him. They find something that doesn't fit the pattern, she said. A detail that jumps. A face they recognize. A name that pings. She stopped. Or someone talks. The word sat between them. Nobody here is going to talk, Daniel said. You don't know that. I know Garrett. You knew me for 6 hours before you put me in your spare room, she said. Not unkindly. Your ability to trust people quickly is one of your best qualities and your most dangerous one. He didn't argue with that. It was true. What are you saying? He asked. I'm saying we should assume the perimeter is tighter than we think, she said, and plan accordingly. His phone buzzed on the table. He looked at it. Carol Vinson. He answered on speaker. I've made contact with my FBI source, Carol said. Agent David Marsh. He's financial crimes. He's clean, and he's seen the preliminary summary I gave him. A pause. He wants the device. How does he get it? Emily asked. That's what I'm calling about, Carol said. He wants to meet. He says he can be in your area tomorrow morning. Emily and Daniel looked at each other. Define area, Daniel said. He knows you're in the Willow Creek vicinity, Carol said. I had to give him a general location so he could get there. I didn't give him an address. Emily closed her eyes briefly. How clean is he, Carol? Really? I've known David Marsh for 11 years, Carol said. He closed a case against a hedge fund manager in 2019 that 3 other agents dropped because of pressure from above. He has never once cut a corner in a direction that benefited himself. She paused. He's clean. Emily. And when he has the device, Emily said. How fast does the case move? He can file for an emergency protective order and a material witness designation within 24 hours of taking possession, Carol said. Once you're a material witness on a federal case, Hale's people can't touch you without triggering federal obstruction charges. It creates a legal wall. Emily opened her eyes. She was looking at the device in her jacket pocket. Her hand pressed flat over it. A legal wall doesn't stop a bullet, she said. No, Carol said, but it makes pulling the trigger enormously more expensive for Hale. He's a businessman. The calculus changes. And until the meeting tomorrow morning, Daniels said. She stays here. Yes, Carol said. And you trust the agent to not have Hale's people following him to us. He'll check for a tail, Carol said. He knows the stakes. He's been wanting to get to Hale for 3 years. A pause. Okay, Emily said. Where and when? Carol gave them a location. Not the shop. Not the house. A public place with multiple exits that Carol had apparently already researched. Because she gave them the cross streets and the parking situation, and 2 alternate departure routes without being asked. 9 a.m., Carol said. David will be driving a gray Jeep Cherokee. Personal vehicle. Not a federal plate. He'll be alone. If he's not alone, Emily said. Then you walk, Carol said simply, and we find another way. They hung up. The house was very quiet. The afternoon had gone long, and the light through the windows had changed angles without either of them noticing. The way time does when you're inside something that requires all of your attention. Emily put her hand flat on the table. We're close, she said. And he could hear in her voice that she was saying it to herself as much as to him, reminding herself that the end of this was a real thing. A thing that existed, not just a concept she'd been running toward for 212 days. We're close, he confirmed. She nodded. Once. Then she stood up and said, I should eat something. Do you want me to cook? He looked at her. You cook? He asked. I used to be a functional adult, she said. with a dryness that was the closest thing to normal she'd managed since the road. I had an apartment and a kitchen and everything. Then yes, he said. Please. She cooked. She found what was in the refrigerator and made something out of it that was better than the sum of its parts, with pasta, olive oil, and garlic, and whatever vegetables were left in the crisper drawer, which turned out to be enough. He set the table because it felt right. The ordinary rhythm of two people in a kitchen, managing something simple together. They ate without talking very much, and the quiet was not uncomfortable. It was the quiet of two people who had spent several days in a high-wire situation and had found, without planning it, a moment where the wire was steadier. At some point, Emily said, "Tell me about the shop. How did you start it?" He told her. It was not a dramatic story. He'd worked for another shop in Nashville for 4 years after mechanic school. Saved money, moved to Willow Creek when Karen got the Vanderbilt job. Found the 2-bay garage available at a rent that was either a good deal or a sign that something was wrong with it, which turned out to be that the roof needed replacing, which he did himself over 3 weekends. Started with nothing and built it into something that covered the bills and occasionally did better than that. "It's yours," Emily said. When he finished, he looked at her. "What you built," she said. "It's entirely yours. Nobody gave it to you, and nobody can take credit for it." She looked at her plate. "I know what that's worth because I had something like it once, and then it was gone in 48 hours. You'll have it again," he said. She looked up. "I don't know what I'll have when this is over. I haven't let myself think that far." She put her fork down for a long time. Thinking past the next 24 hours felt dangerous, like I'd jinx it. And now? She was quiet for a moment. Now it feels like maybe it's okay to wonder. She looked at him across the table. "That's your fault. By the way, I'll take that," he said. She almost smiled. It was brief and real, and she didn't try to hold it, which made it more real. He was washing the dishes when his phone rang. It was Garrett. "The black car's back," Garrett said. "It's not on the strip this time. It's on Millhouse Road." Daniel turned off the faucet. Emily looked at him from across the kitchen. "Millhouse Road," Daniel said. "That's 2 blocks from here, I know," Garrett said. "How long has it been there?" "I saw it 20 minutes ago when I drove home. I went past it once. 2 men inside. Engine running." He paused. "I know," I said. "Hold on the uncle." But Daniel was already moving to the front window, angling to see out without being visible. The street in front of the house was empty. Ordinary. The kind of ordinary
that you have to decide whether to trust.
"Don't call the uncle yet," Daniel said. "But stay available." He hung up. Emily was already at the window on the other side of the room, doing the same thing he was doing, looking at the street from the edge. "They're not on this street," he said. "They're close enough," she said. "Can they know we're at this address?" If they've been canvassing the area around Route 7 systematically, they've been going house by house in some grid pattern. This address is inside any reasonable search radius. She turned from the window. They don't know for certain. They're working probability. But they're close enough now that certain or uncertain doesn't matter much. "So the meeting tomorrow morning," Daniel said. "Might not be reachable," she said. "If they tighten the cordon overnight, what do we do?" She stood very still for a moment. He could see her running calculations. The same way he ran calculations when a repair was more complicated than the original assessment, and he had to reconfigure everything from the current state of what was actually in front of him, rather than what had been expected. "We move the meeting," she said. "Not the time. The location." She picked up the burner. "I call Carol. We choose somewhere new. Somewhere that doesn't require us to drive through the part of town where that car is parked." "There's the old Hendricks property on the east side," Daniel said. "County Road. No cross traffic. Ruth uses the driveway to turn around when she overshoot the road. Otherwise, nobody goes there. The house has been empty for 2 years." Emily looked at him. "You know every road in this county, don't you?" "I've fixed a lot of cars," he said. "You learn where things are." She called Carol. Gave her the new location. Carol relayed it to Agent Marsh. The response came back in 4 minutes, which was fast. which Daniel understood meant that Marsh was already in transit, already heading south from wherever he'd been. The confirmation came through the burner at 9:47 p.m. Marsh agreed to the new location, 9 a.m., gray Jeep Cherokee. Emily put the burner in her jacket pocket and stood in the kitchen with her arms crossed and her weight balanced carefully on both legs, and for a long moment she just breathed. In and out, in and out. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, he said. And if something goes wrong between now and then. He looked at her. Then we handle it, he said. The same way we've handled everything else. One step. She looked at him for a moment. And something shifted in her face that he recognized because he'd felt it himself. In the worst year after Karen, when people had tried to help him, and he'd had to learn how to let them. That shift. The specific internal movement of someone who has been carrying something alone for so long, that accepting help feels like admitting a failure they haven't committed. I don't know how to thank you, she said. I've been trying to figure out how to say it properly since the first morning, and I still don't have the words. You don't need words, he said. I need something, she said. Because what you've done, what you're still doing, is not a small thing. It is not a simple thing. And I know you keep calling it simple, but it is not. He was quiet for a moment. After Karen died, he said, I spent about 6 months convinced that I was just surviving. Getting Sophie to school, getting to the shop, getting through the day. And one night, Ruth showed up with a casserole, and I remember thinking, this woman drove 3 blocks in the dark to bring me a casserole I didn't ask for. And I almost said no. I almost said I was fine, because I didn't want her to see that I wasn't. He looked at Emily, and then I thought about Karen, and I took the casserole. Emily was watching him. People who take the casserole, he said, and people who bring it. That's the whole thing. That's the whole of it. You're someone who spent 6 months trying to do the right thing alone, because you didn't think you had a right to pull anyone else in. And I'm someone who stopped a truck, because I didn't think I had a right to keep driving. She was very still. You don't have to thank me, he said. You just have to get through tomorrow. She looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, he checked the locks. Front door. Back door chain on both. He turned off the lights that faced the street. He told Emily to keep her room dark, and she said she would, and he believed her. He went to his room and sat on the edge of the bed. He wasn't afraid. Exactly. What he felt was something closer to the sensation he got in the middle of a complicated repair when all the parts were exposed and he'd traced every connection and understood every variable, and there was nothing left to do but put it together and see if it held. A kind of still readiness that was not calm but was functional. He was about to lie down when Himmel's aid. A text from Garrett. 3 words, car is gone. Daniel stared at it. He typed back. When? Garrett. 10 minutes ago. Just left. Didn't come toward your street. Daniel sat with that. Turned it over. It could mean they'd given up for the night. It could mean they'd found what they needed and were reporting back. It could mean they'd seen something that told them the address was wrong, and they were moving the search elsewhere. He didn't know which. He typed. Thanks. Get some sleep. Garrett, you too. Daniel put the phone on the nightstand. He looked at the ceiling. He thought about Sophie making biscuits at Ruth's kitchen table. Very serious about the butter. He thought about the Silverado parked in the shop lot. Mission accomplished. He thought about Carol Vinson on the phone with David Marsh right now, going through everything, building the framework that was going to end Richard Hale's career and freedom and reach. He thought about a woman on the side of Route 7 in the rain. He thought about 100 cars that kept driving. He closed his eyes. He was asleep in 11 minutes, which was, under the circumstances, an act of pure stubborn faith in the morning. He woke at 5:43 to a sound that was wrong. He was on his feet before he was fully conscious. The way he'd learned to move in the year, Sophie was an infant, and any sound in the night required immediate response. His feet found the floor, his hand found the door. He opened it. Emily was in the hallway, already dressed, already carrying her jacket, the device in her left hand where he could see it. Someone's in the yard, she said. He went to the window at the end of the hallway. angled to the edge. The side yard was dark, and the tilted basketball hoop was a silhouette, and there was, at the back fence line, a shape that did not belong to anything that should have been there. A person, standing still, watching the house. Back fence, he said. Very quietly. I know, she said. I've been watching for 3 minutes. They haven't moved. Checking, he said. Not moving. So they don't know. But they found the street, she said. He pulled back from the window. His mind was moving fast and clean. The way it did under the car when something was actually wrong, and there was no room for panic and no utility in it. Garrett, he said. Don't call him, she said. Don't pull anyone else. I'm not pulling him in. I'm telling him to stay away from here this morning. He picked up his phone, texted. Garrett. Don't come to the house today. I'll explain later. He put the phone down. We need to get to the Hendricks property by 9. That's 3 hours. They're watching the house. Which means the house exit is compromised. Which means... The shop, she said. Is there a back way out of the shop? Through the hardware store alley next door. It goes out to Cherry Street, which is 3 blocks north. Can we get to the shop from here without going through the front? He thought. There's a cut-through in the neighbor's yard. Old Weston next door. He won't be up for 2 hours. Can we use it? He won't care. That's don't care. Emily. I fixed his truck twice and refused to charge him the second time. He won't care. She looked at him. Made the decision in about 2 seconds. Okay, we go now. Before it's light enough for them to see clearly. Give me 2 minutes. He got dressed in the dark. Boots. Jacket. He grabbed the truck keys and the phone and his wallet and he stood in his bedroom doorway for exactly 3 seconds and looked at the room that was his, that he'd built and maintained and filled with the evidence of his life. And he thought about the possibility that the next few hours could change what he came back to. Then he thought about Karen, about the casserole, about the choice that is not simple but is clear. He walked down the hallway. Emily was at the back door. The chain already off, waiting. Ready? She said. Yeah, he said. Daniel. She stopped, looked at him in the half-dark of the hallway. Whatever happens in the next few hours, whatever the outcome, I want you to know that She stopped. I want you to know that you gave me something back that I'd given up on. He looked at her. Tell me later, he said. When it's over. She held her eyes for a moment. Okay, she said. Later. He opened the back door. They went out into the pre-dawn dark, moving low and fast along the fence line toward Weston's yard. The black device in Emily's hand and the device carrier in Daniel's face. And behind them the house sat quiet in the dark, while at the back fence line, the shape of a man stood watching it, not yet knowing that what he'd been sent to find was already gone. 3 hours. 3 hours to the Hendricks property. 3 hours to Agent Marsh and the gray Jeep Cherokee and the legal wall, and the beginning of the end of Richard Hale's long, protected freedom. 3 hours was everything, and they were already moving. They moved through Weston's yard in the dark, without a sound. Emily close behind Daniel, her knee holding better than it had any right to after everything she'd put it through. The pre-dawn air was cold and still, and the kind of quiet that exists in the hour before the world remembers it needs to be loud again. They reached the shop through the hardware store alley in 11 minutes. Daniel unlocked the side door without turning on any lights. They moved by memory, and the thin gray beginning of morning coming through the high windows. The truck's outside, Daniel said, barely above a whisper. We take it to Cherry Street. Come around the north side of town. Avoid Millhouse Road entirely. If they have more than one car, Emily said, then we deal with one problem at a time. She looked at him in the dim shop light. She'd been doing that since the hallway, looking at him like she was trying to memorize something. He noticed it and didn't say anything about it, and they moved. The truck started on the first turn of the key, which Daniel received as a small mercy and did not take for granted. He pulled out slowly. No headlights until they hit Cherry Street, and then north and around and east, threading through the quiet residential blocks of Willow Creek at 5:58 in the morning, while the town slept around them with complete indifference to everything that was happening inside it. Emily watched the mirrors. He watched the road. Nobody followed. They were 4 miles out of town before either of them took a full breath. "The man at the fence," Emily said. "When they report back that the house was empty, they'll know we moved," Daniel said. "They'll know we were warned," she said, "which means they'll think about who warned us, and they'll work backward to Garrett." Daniel's jaw tightened. He hadn't thought it through that far, and he should have. "I'll call him." "Not on your personal phone." He looked at her. "I don't have a burner." She pulled out a second phone from her jacket pocket. He stared at it. "You had a second burner," he said. "I had a second burner," she confirmed. "For exactly this kind of situation. I should have given it to you 3 days ago." She handed it to him. He called Garrett's number from memory. It rang 4 times, and he was about to leave a message when Garrett picked up, voice thick with recent sleep. "Yeah, it's me," Daniel said. "Different phone. Listen carefully. Don't go to the shop today. Don't go to your usual diner. Go somewhere you don't normally go and stay there until I call you again on this number." A pause. When Garrett spoke again, the sleep was gone from his voice entirely. "How bad?" "Manageable," Daniel said. "But you need to be somewhere unexpected." "My cousin Joe's place," Garrett said immediately. "The one with the truck." "Perfect. Go now." "Okay." Another pause. "Daniel, you good?" "Working on it," Daniel said, and hung up. Emily was watching him. "He'll be okay," she said. "He better be," Daniel said. "He's 23 and this is not his problem." "He made it his problem," she said quietly. "People keep doing that," he said. And he meant it without resentment, with something that was closer to the bone-deep gratitude of a man who had spent years trying not to need anything from anyone and was being taught. At approximately 50 miles per hour on a county road before sunrise. That needing people was not the weakness he'd decided it was. They reached the Hendricks property at 7:22, an hour and 38 minutes early. Daniel pulled the truck around the back of the empty house, out of sight from the county road, and cut the engine. They waited. Waiting, Daniel had always found, was the hardest mechanical work. When you were waiting on a part to arrive, on a seal to cure, on an engine to cool enough to touch, there was nothing to do with your hands, and everything continued happening inside your head without your permission. He'd learned to work through it by making listas, by identifying every variable he could control and accepting every one he couldn't. He made the list now. Carol Vinson was in contact with Agent Marsh. Marsh was driving down from he didn't know where. But he was moving. The evidence was in Emily's pocket. Garrett was headed to his cousin's. Ruth had Sophie, and Sophie was eating biscuits and had no idea that anything was wrong. Which was exactly correct, which was the one part of all of this that Daniel had managed with complete success. Those were the things he controlled. He could not control what the man at the back fence had reported or to whom. He could not control how fast Hale's network moved to shift their search pattern. He could not control whether Agent Marsh was the man Carol believed him to be. He accepted those. It was the only way to wait. Emily sat beside him with the device in her hands, not turning it over the way she had in the beginning, just holding it flat in her palms. Like she was aware of the weight of it in a way that was different now that the end was close enough to see. "What's the first thing you're going to do?" he said. "When it's over." She looked at him. "Sleep," she said. "An entire day. In a room where I don't have to watch the window. And after that?" She thought about it. Really thought. Not the way she'd dismissed forward thinking before, but with the slow, careful attention of someone allowing themselves the luxury for the first time in a long time. "I want to see the ocean," she said. "I grew up in Ohio. I've been to the ocean twice in my life, and both times it was a business trip, and I barely saw it." She looked at the device in her hands. "I want to go stand on a beach somewhere and watch the water and not have to think about anything with edges." He smiled a little. "That sounds exactly right. What about you?" she said. "When this is over."
What changes?
He considered it. The shop, the house, the Saturday pancakes, the accumulation of ordinary days that had felt, for a long time, like enough, and had recently started to feel like the foundation of something rather than the whole of it. "I think I stopped pretending I'm only surviving," he said. She looked at him. "I've been telling myself I'm just getting through," he said. "Just maintaining. Just keeping things going until Sophie's older and things are easier. But things get easier by themselves. You have to decide they're going to be different." He looked at the window. "I think I decided that somewhere between Route 7 and now." Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Karen would have liked this week." He looked at her, surprised. "Not the dangerous parts," she said. "The parts where you just kept deciding to do the right thing." She paused. "She sounds like someone who would have appreciated that." He was quiet. The thing she'd said landed somewhere deep where he didn't have language for it. And he sat with it and didn't try to translate it, and just let it be true. "Yeah," he said. After a moment, "She would have." At 8:49, the burner buzzed. "Carol, Marsh is 12 minutes out," Carol said. "He confirmed clean tail check detection route for 40 minutes before heading to you. He's alone." "Understood," Emily said. "Emily." Carol's voice shifted slightly. "It's almost done, don't," Emily said, not harshly, just firmly, the way she'd been firm about every other piece of forward thinking. "Not until I'm holding a receipt." "Fair," Carol said. 12 minutes. They hung up. Daniel got out of the truck and walked around to the county road side of the property to watch for the gray Jeep. Emily got out too, because sitting still had become impossible for her, and she stood a few feet away with her arms crossed and her eyes on the road. At 8:57, a gray Jeep Cherokee came around the bend in the county road and slowed. Daniel stepped slightly into the road's edge and raised a hand. The Jeep pulled onto the property and stopped. The man who got out was somewhere in his mid-40s, medium height, with the kind of unremarkable face that was either natural or deliberately cultivated, the kind of face that is hard to describe after the fact. He was wearing a plain jacket and jeans and carrying nothing that was visible. He looked at Daniel first, then at Emily, and his face, when he saw Emily, did something that was not professional neutrality. It was recognition. But more than that, it was the look of someone who has been reading about a situation for long enough that seeing it made real has weight. "Ms. Brooks," he said. "Agent Marsh," she said. "Carol sends her best." He extended his hand. He was looking at her the way Carol had, with something that was not pity, because neither of these women would have accepted pity, but was the considered respect of people who understood what 6 months of doing the right thing under pressure actually cost. Emily shook his hand. "I've read the summary Carol sent me," Marsh said. "I want you to know before we go any further that the case she's described, if the evidence holds, and I have every reason to believe it does, is the most complete financial fraud documentation package I've seen in 22 years. You built something solid, Ms. Brooks." "I just kept what I found," she said, "for 213 days. That's not nothing," he said. "That's everything." She reached into her jacket pocket. She held the device in her hand for one moment, one single moment in which Daniel did not look at her, because that moment was hers, and then she extended it to Agent Marsh. He took it. He handled it with the deliberate care of someone who understood chain of custody, not as a procedural concept, but as the thing that stood between a conviction and a dismissal. He had an evidence bag already prepared in his jacket pocket. Sealed, labeled, and dated. He placed the device inside it. He sealed it. He held it up, looked at it, and said, "Time of transfer, 8:59 a.m. Central Time." He wrote it on the evidence seal in a small, precise hand. Then he looked at Emily. "I'm going to need your formal statement. Not today. I need to get this to our forensic team and file the protective order. But within the next 48 hours, I'll have agents come to wherever you're staying for a formal recorded statement." "She's staying with me," Daniel said. Marsh looked at him. "And you are?" "Daniel Carter. I'm the one who found her on Route 7. She's been at my place in Willow Creek since that night." Marsh looked between them. "There are individuals actively searching for Ms. Brooks in that vicinity," he said carefully. "We know," Daniel said. "We saw them last night." Marsh processed this. I can have protective surveillance on the house within. Can you have it there before we get back? Emily asked. Marsh looked at his watch. He pulled out his phone. He made a call that lasted 90 seconds. His voice low and precise, and when he hung up, he looked at Emily. Car will be at your street in 40 minutes. Unmarked. 2 agents. They'll stay until the protective order is filed and served, which will happen by end of business today. Emily looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at her. Okay, she said. To Marsh. What happens to Hale? Marsh squared the evidence bag in both hands. Once I file this morning and the forensic team confirms the data integrity, I'll be requesting an arrest warrant. Given the evidence summary Carol provided, I expect the warrant to be issued within 24 hours, possibly faster. And his network, she said. The people who have been, every individual who acted on his behalf to intimidate, threaten, or physically endanger you, or anyone connected to this case becomes part of the federal obstruction charge, Marsh said, which, given what Carol has described, will be extensive. He looked at her steadily. They don't get to just be employees who were following orders, Ms. Brooks. Not with what's been done. Emily absorbed this. She was standing very still, the way she'd been still on the road when something cost her something. But this stillness was different. This was the stillness of a person who had been carrying something at a full sprint for 213 days and had just handed it to someone else and was standing in the moment of not having to run anymore and didn't quite know what to do with her body now that it didn't have a task. Okay, she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not shaking. She had earned both of those things completely. Thank you, Marsh said sincerely. He drove away 4 minutes later. They watched the gray Jeep until it disappeared around the bend in the county road, and the sound of its engine faded into the general morning quiet of a Tennessee field in October. The silence after was the loudest thing Daniel had heard in days. Emily stood looking at the road where the Jeep had been. Her arms were at her sides. Her hands were empty. He watched her. He'd been watching her for days now. The way you watch someone you're responsible for, alert, peripheral, tracking, and this was the first time he was watching her without the operational focus underneath it. Just watching her be a person standing in a field in the morning light with nothing chasing her. She turned around. Is it possible, she said, that it's actually over? Not yet, he said. Warrants got to come through. Arrest has to happen. Protective order has to be served. But the evidence is out of my hands, she said. The evidence is out of your hands, he confirmed. She looked at him. And I survived. You survived. She looked away. Back at the road, and her jaw worked once hard. And then she got it under control with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been controlling themselves under pressure for so long that even the moment when the pressure finally broke, defaulted to the same muscle. Emily, he said. She looked at him. It's over, he said. You can breathe, she breathed, once. Fully, the whole capacity of her lungs, and it came out slow and uneven at the end. And she pressed her hand flat over her mouth for a moment. And then she dropped it and looked at the sky and said, quietly, to no one in particular, 213 days. He didn't say anything. Some things need to be said to the sky. They drove back to Willow Creek. The unmarked federal car was already on the street. When they arrived, a dark blue sedan parked half a block up, doing exactly what it was supposed to do, which was be visible enough to matter and not to alarm anyone who didn't already know what they were looking at. At 10:42 a.m., Carol called. The protective order had been filed and electronically served to Richard Hale's legal team. At 11:15, Carol called again to say that the forensics team at the FBI field office had confirmed the data integrity of the device's contents. At 12:03, Agent Marsh sent a one-sentence message to the burner phone. Warrant requested. Each call, Emily repeated the information to Daniel in the same tone. And each time, something shifted fractionally in her face. Like a gauge moving, like something that had been running red was slowly, increment by increment, moving toward green. He picked Sophie up from Ruth's at 2 in the afternoon. Sophie came out of Ruth's front door with flour on her shirt and a paper bag that she held up immediately upon seeing him. "I made bisques," she announced. "Ruth says mine are better than hers, but she's lying to be nice." "How do you know she's lying?" Daniel asked. "Because hers were better," Sophie said, with the cheerful directness of an 8-year-old who has not yet learned to protect anyone's feelings, including her own. "But mine were still good." She looked past him at the truck, where Emily was visible in the passenger seat. "She's still here," Sophie observed. "Still here," Daniel confirmed. Sophie got in the truck, said hi to Emily with the easy familiarity of a child who had simply integrated this new person into the existing world and moved on, and held up the paper bag. "I made biscuits. Do you want one?" Emily took a biscuit from the bag. She looked at it. She took a bite. And something crossed her face that Daniel recognized, not because he'd seen it before exactly, but because he'd felt it. The specific combination of ordinary goodness and unexpected timing that makes something as simple as a biscuit to feel like being let back into the human race. "It's very good," Emily said. Sophie examined her own biscuit critically. "It could be flakier," she said. "It really couldn't," Emily said. Sophie appeared to accept this and started eating. Daniel drove home. That evening, the three of them ate dinner at the kitchen table soup this time, because Daniel made it and he was not the cook. Emily was, but it was warm and sufficient, and nobody complained. Sophie talked about biscuits and soccer, and a girl at school named Madison who had apparently committed some social infraction too complex to explain, but which required several minutes of context. Emily listened with her full attention. The kind of full attention that Sophie, who was perceptive in the way children sometimes are, noticed and responded to by talking more, by directing more of it at Emily, by including her in the story the way children include people they've decided matter. At 7:45, the burner buzzed. Carol's number. Daniel answered it and put it on the table between them. "Speaker on." "The warrant's been issued," Carol said. Emily went very still. Richard Hale was taken into federal custody at his office in Chicago at 6:32 p.m. Central Time, Carol said. 4 other individuals associated with Mercer Hale Capital Management were also taken into custody on related charges. The FBI is issuing a public statement within the hour. The kitchen was completely silent. Sophie looked between the 2 adults and had the wisdom to not say anything. The 2 individuals who were conducting the search in the Willow Creek area, Carol continued, are being identified as persons of interest in the federal obstruction inquiry. Their names have been provided to the agents currently on your street. A pause. "Emily, it's done." Emily sat with both hands flat on the table, looking at the phone. "It's done," Carol said again, gently. "I heard you," Emily said. Her voice was even. "I just stopped. I heard you." Carol. "I know," Carol said. "I know you did." "The investors," Emily said. "The pension funds." Marcus Webb. "Part of the prosecution will include full disclosure and restitution proceedings," Carol said. "It'll take time. The legal process takes time. But they're in the system now. They exist." A pause. "Marcus Webb is already getting calls from his former colleagues. The flag on his professional license will be reviewed and almost certainly reversed." Emily closed her eyes. "You did this," Carol said. "For everyone who got hurt by this man. You are why this happened." "I just kept what I found," Emily said. For the second time that day, and the second time it was just as insufficient, and just as true. "That was everything," Carol said. "Get some sleep." "Emily." She hung up. The kitchen was quiet. Sophie looked at Emily. "Is something good happening?" she asked. Emily opened her eyes. She looked at Sophie across the kitchen table. This 8-year-old in a flour-stained shirt who had offered her a stool and a biscuit, and the complete, uncomplicated acceptance of a child who has been raised by someone who stopped trucks for strangers and made Mickey Mouse pancakes on Saturday mornings and taught his daughter by example what it meant to live. "Yes," Emily said, "something very good." "Okay," Sophie said, satisfied. "Can I have more soup?" Daniel got up and got her more soup, and Emily watched him. And the kitchen was warm and ordinary, and nothing terrible was happening anywhere in it. And for a long time, that was the whole of the world. 3 weeks later, two things happened. The first was that Marcus Webb called Emily directly, which he'd gotten permission from the FBI's victim coordination team to do. He was 26 and had been out of work for 8 months and had spent most of that time wondering whether he'd been wrong, whether his reading of the numbers had been a mistake, whether the systematic destruction of his professional reputation was somehow deserved. The call lasted 44 minutes. Emily sat in Daniel's kitchen and talked to him through everything she'd found, every confirmation of what he'd first noticed, every piece of evidence that proved he had been the first person to see clearly, and had paid for it unfairly. At the end of the call, Marcus was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "I thought I was crazy." And Emily said, "You were the first person who was right." And Marcus said, "Thank you." And Emily said, "Don't thank me. Go get your license back." And he said he would, and he meant it. The second thing was that Emily's name appeared in the first major press coverage of the Hale case, in a long investigative piece that had clearly been in preparation for some time, and which named her, accurately and respectfully, as the whistleblower whose 6-month preservation of evidence had made the case possible. The piece mentioned 213 days. It mentioned the encrypted device. It mentioned a small town in Tennessee, without naming the town or the man who had stopped the truck on the highway outside it. Emily read the piece at the kitchen table on her phone. She was still staying at the house. She hadn't made a plan for after yet, which she'd acknowledged to Daniel once directly. And he'd said, "Plans make themselves when you're ready," and she'd said, "That's very mechanically sound reasoning," and he'd said, "I've learned from experience." She put her phone down on the table. She looked at the refrigerator, where Sophie's drawing still hung, the one with Daddy in chunky crayon letters and the extremely large orange cat. Beside it, sometime in the past week, a second drawing had appeared. Sophie had not announced it or made a thing of it. It had simply been there one morning. A person with dark hair and a bandage on one hand, standing next to the large orange cat, and above it in Sophie's labored 8-year-old printing, the word Emily. Emily had looked at that drawing for a long time the morning she noticed it. She had not said anything about it to Sophie, and Sophie had not said anything about it to her, because Sophie was, in ways that reflected directly on her father, a person who understood that some things did not require comment to be real. Daniel came in from the shop at 5:30, the same time he always came in, smelling like engine oil and the particular cold of October air on metal, and found Emily at the table with her phone and 2 cups of coffee, one of which was clearly for him. He sat down. He picked up the coffee. He looked at her. "Article came out," she said. "I know. Garrett texted me. Did he read it?" "He read it and apparently showed everyone in the diner," Daniel said. "So now half of Willow Creek knows, which means by tomorrow the other half will know." She looked at him. "How do you feel about that?" He thought about it. "Same as always," he said. "I stopped the truck. Everything else was you. That's not Emily." She stopped. "You carried that device for 213 days," he said. "You kept the chain of custody intact when people with resources and lawyers and time were trying to break it. You found Carol. You found Marsh. You held it together long enough for it to matter." He looked at her. "I gave you a place to stand. You did the standing." She looked at him for a long time. "I want to tell you something," she said, "and I want you to actually hear it." "Okay," he said. "The night you pulled me off that road," she said, "I had already decided, not consciously, not in a way I was fully admitting to myself, but somewhere in the part of me that was very tired, I had decided that I was probably not going to make it." She said it plainly, without drama. The way she said the hard things, because she'd had to learn to say them, and she'd learned to do it straight. Not that night necessarily, but, in the general sense, that I was probably going to run out of road before I ran out of people looking for me. She looked at the coffee in her hands, and then a truck stopped, and a man got out in the rain and put his hands up and said his name was Daniel and told me his daughter was asleep in the back seat. She looked at him, and I didn't know right then that it was going to be okay. But for the first time in a very long time, I thought it might be possible. The kitchen was very quiet. I need you to understand, she said, that you didn't just help me survive. You gave me back the idea that surviving was worth it. And that is a different thing. That is a larger thing. She paused. So when you say you just gave me a place to stand, I need you to understand that for someone who'd been falling for 7 months, a place to stand is the whole world. Daniel sat with that. He had learned, in the years since Karen, to receive things, to not deflect them or diminish them or turn them into something manageable by making them smaller. Karen had taught him that. It had taken him a long time to learn it, and he was still learning. He received it. Okay, he said. She looked at him. Something settled in her face, the particular settling of something that has been said and heard and does not need to be repeated. Okay, she said. Sophie came home from school at 3:30 and told them both at length about Madison's latest infraction, which involved a handball court and a disputed boundary line. And Daniel listened with appropriate gravity, and Emily offered a negotiation strategy that was, Sophie acknowledged, probably too complicated for Madison, but which she was going to try anyway. That night, Daniel made Mickey Mouse pancakes for dinner, because Sophie had asked, and because it was that kind of day, and the three of them sat at the kitchen table in the warm, ordinary light and ate pancakes too much when Nochumai talked about Hale or Marsh or 213 days or any of it. And it was the best meal Daniel could remember eating in a very long time. 2 months later, Emily Brooks accepted a position as a financial compliance consultant with an independent oversight firm in Nashville. She found an apartment on the east side of the city with a window that looked out over a park. She kept the burner phone in her kitchen drawer, not because she needed it, but because it was the last object she'd held when everything was still uncertain. And she understood now that the uncertain things were where the real life happened. And she didn't want to forget that. She drove back to Willow Creek on Saturdays. Not every Saturday, but most of them. And Daniel Carter opened his shop 6 days a week and fixed what was broken and charged what was fair and turned away no one who couldn't fully pay and was known throughout Willow Creek and the surrounding county as a man who would stop what he was doing for whoever needed it. He was not famous. He was not wealthy. He had no reason to be either. He had Sophie. He had a shop that was his. He had Ruth 3 doors down with her casseroles and her patients. He had Garrett, who had gotten his that Daniel couldn't entirely afford and paid anyway. He had a cardinal in the side yard that sang every morning without being asked. And on Saturday mornings, when Emily's car pulled into the driveway, Sophie would hear it from inside the house and shout, before anyone had knocked or called, "She's here," in the tone of someone announcing something straightforwardly good. The way children announce things that are good without complicating them. And Daniel would put another plate out on the table. And the pancakes were Mickey Mouse ones. Always, because that was the rule. And the rule held. Some things, once started, keep going. Some choices made in the dark on the side of a wet highway in the rain reach further than the person making them can see. Daniel Carter had stopped his truck on Route 7 because 100 other people hadn't. And because his late wife had told him once that the hardest thing in the world was to care. And he had decided, somewhere between the brake pedal and the shoulder of the road, that hard was not the same as wrong. He had been right about that. He was right about it every Saturday morning with the pancakes and the extra plate and the sound of Sophie saying, "She's here," to an empty room. Right about it in the way that only the simplest and most difficult things are right. Completely. And without qualification, down to the bone. He had stopped the truck. Everything that mattered had started there, and nothing that mattered had stopped since.